They never saw you. Not really. Not through the noise. Not beyond the mask you wore to survive. You walked past them 1,000 times, eyes hollow, soul heavy and still. They never paused long enough to ask who you were beneath the weight. And even if they had, would they have listened? Would they have believed the storm quietly coiled behind your stillness? Number, because silence isn't loud enough to shake them. Pain, hidden behind clenched jaws and sleepless nights, doesn't perform for applause. And so they ignored you. They labeled you invisible, insignificant, unnecessary, a ghost walking through the living. But they made one mistake. They thought your silence was surrender. What they couldn't see was that you weren't broken. You were biding time. Every breath you took in silence, every insult swallowed, every night you cried with no one watching. It was all part of the bill. They thought you were done, that you were finished, that the world had chewed you up and spit you out as nothing. But that's not what happened, is it? You were buried, yes, but not dead, not defeated, dormant, waiting, like fire underneath frozen earth, like a beast pacing behind a locked door. Quiet doesn't mean gone. It means gathering, waiting for the moment when you don't need to ask for the mic, because you'll rip it out of their hand. You learned early that noise doesn't always equal strength, that the loudest ones are often the weakest. And so you sat with your pain. You bled in silence. You stitched your wounds with gritted teeth. You kept going when everything begged you to stop, not because you knew you'd win, but because quitting would have confirmed every damn thing they said about you. And that you couldn't allow. Even if it meant crawling through hell, you chose to keep going, not to prove something to the world, but because deep down, a part of you knew you were meant for more, that this life, this cave, this name they tried to brand on you was not the end. They talked. Oh, they talked. They said you were weak, that you were lost, that you were a nobody, wasting time, wasting breath, chasing illusions. They laughed when you showed up broken. They mocked your effort. They mistook your hesitation for stupidity. They called you dreamer like it was an insult. But what they didn't understand is that you were never reaching for the stars to impress them. You were reaching for them to survive, to escape, to breathe something cleaner than the poisoned air they choked you with. Your dreams weren't fantasies. They were the only thing keeping your soul from collapsing under the weight of their world. And yet through all of it, you stayed standing. Maybe you staggered, maybe you fell. Maybe some nights, your only victory was getting out of bed. But you stayed in the fight, and no one gave you credit for that. No one handed you medals for making it through days you wanted to disappear from. That's the truth they never tell you. Some of the strongest people wear no crown, no title, no praise, just scars. And yet they walk anyway. You were one of them, you still are. One of the forgotten, one of the underestimated. The ones who aren't flashy enough to be noticed but too dangerous to be ignored for long. You've been gathering storms in your chest, and they have no idea what's coming, because there comes a point when silence is no longer silent, when the stillness before the quake becomes a threat all its own. You're not waiting anymore. You're sharpening, honing, forging yourself behind closed doors, and soon they'll hear it, the sound of reckoning, the sound of footsteps they thought they'd never have to answer for, the sound of someone they buried, climbing out of the dirt with fire in their lungs and vengeance in their eyes, not to beg, not to explain, but to dominate. This world forgot who you were, so now you'll remind it, not with words, with presence, with unshakable, undeniable presence. No more asking for permission, no more waiting to be chosen. You are not here to be liked. You are here to be remembered. And when they finally see you, really see you, it will already be too late. Because the one they thought was done, the one they counted out, the one they called worthless, that one is gone. What stands in their place now is something different, something born in the silence, something built in the dark. You are the storm, and you've been quiet long enough. The shadows didn't arrive all at once. Number, they crept in, slow, patient, cunning. They started early, didn't they? Before you even knew what to call them. When the world was still supposed to be soft, safe, but it wasn't. Not for you. For some, childhood was sunlight and lullabies. For you, it was the cold echo of slammed doors and words that cut deeper than belts ever could. You learned too early how to cry without making a sound, how to flinch without moving, how to dream without hope, because even that was dangerous. The shadows taught you silence, taught you how to survive while pretending you were fine. You remember the looks, don't you? The way teachers overlooked you, the way your so-called friends laughed just a little too loud at your pain, the way your family didn't see your battles, or worse, didn't care to. You were the punchline, the mistake, the one who didn't belong. And when you tried to speak, to scream, to fight back, they told you to stop being dramatic. They told you it was all in your head, so you started to believe them. You started to believe you were the problem, not the chaos, not the betrayal, not the endless ache of being unwanted, just you. That's the kind of damage no one sees, the kind that doesn't show up in X-rays, the kind that turns self-worth into a battlefield. They handed you shame like a legacy, passed it down like a cursed heirloom. They made you carry it, and then mocked how heavy you looked, told you to smile while they watched you bleed. And every time you reached out, hoping someone might offer a hand instead of another wound, you were met with rejection, that cold, familiar sting, not just once, repeatedly, until even hope started to feel like a threat, until your heart built walls so high, even you forgot how to climb them. You stopped expecting kindness, you stopped expecting anything, and in that vacuum, the shadows grew louder. They told you things, whispered lies with such persistence you began to adopt them as truth. You're not enough. You never were. No one's coming. And slowly, you agreed, not out of weakness, but out of exhaustion. You were tired of fighting for worth in a world that handed it out like currency, reserved only for the beautiful, the charming, the already whole. You were chipped, fractured. You spoke in cracked syllables and walked with invisible limps. The world didn't want your truth. It wanted your compliance, your silence, your obedience. And when you didn't give it, it mocked you, betrayed you. Do you remember how they used to laugh? How their words cut like serrated knives, not sharp enough to kill, just enough to make you bleed slow. They made you the target, the joke, the outcast, and every cruel word, every sneer, every whisper behind your back carved itself into your bones. They were building scars before you even knew what healing looked like, before you even knew it was possible. And yet, somehow, you endured. You didn't even know what you were holding back then. You just knew you had to keep moving, even if it meant dragging yourself through the ashes of every broken promise. You wore your pain like armor, rusted, heavy, but it kept you alive. And isn't that something? That you're still here. That after everything, every lie, every betrayal, every night you thought about disappearing, you stayed. Maybe not by choice, maybe not with joy, but still, you stayed. The world tried to convince you that you were less than, that you were a background character in a play you never auditioned for, that your voice was noise, your presence a mistake. And the more they repeated it, the more it sunk in, like rot in the foundation of your soul. You started to doubt your reflection. You started to silence your own voice before anyone else could. You became the villain in your own story because they made you believe you didn't deserve to be the hero. But here's what they never understood. Every shadow you walked through didn't swallow you. It sharpened you. Every rejection didn't erase you. It revealed who wasn't meant to stay. And every betrayal, it taught you how to stand on your own. Not proudly at first, not with strength, but with stubbornness, with the kind of grit that doesn't need applause to survive, the kind of resilience that doesn't look pretty on posters. It looks like scraped knees, bloodshot eyes, and a heart that refuses to die. They saw your scars and mistook them for weakness, but they never asked how deep the cuts went. They never asked how many times you had to pull the knife out yourself. They never knew how many tears you swallowed just to make it to tomorrow. You've bled in silence more than they've ever suffered in noise, and that pain, it became your blueprint. It became the ink in your story, the one no one expected you to finish writing. You are not weak because you were broken. You are powerful because you refused to stay shattered. This isn't just about pain. It's about transformation, the kind that doesn't happen in the light. It happens in the trenches, in the wars no one saw, in the nights you held yourself together with nothing but a whisper and a worn-out heartbeat. You were forged in that, in shadow, in silence, in solitude, and now you're no longer hiding from it. You wear your shadows like a crown. You walk with the weight of your past, not as a burden, but as proof that you survived what should have destroyed you, that you became what they never wanted you to become. They thought your scars made you ugly, but they made you real. And real is unstoppable. They laughed at you, not the kind of laugh that's innocent or forgettable. No, this was the cold, deliberate kind, the kind that echoes in your chest long after the sound has faded, the kind that sharpens itself against your soul. They didn't just doubt you, they enjoyed it. There was a spark in their eyes every time you stumbled, a smirk that slipped out when your name was followed by failure. They wore your pain like a medal, celebrated it, passed it around like gossip meant to entertain. Every moment you struggled was just proof to them that they were right about you. You'll never be anything. That's what they said. Maybe not always out loud, but in the way they looked at you, in the way they excluded you, in the way they said, "Good luck with that fake smile masking quiet contempt." They never saw the hunger in your eyes, never cared to. To them you were a waste of space, a background noise, a failed attempt, a lost cause. You're not smart enough. They made that clear. In school, at work, in conversations where your voice was cut off before your thoughts were even born. They made you question your own mind, like every idea you ever had was foolish, like intelligence only belonged to people with the right accent, the right face, the right bloodline. They underestimated your mind because they couldn't comprehend what it meant to grow up thinking in survival mode. While they had luxury, you had to calculate how to endure. They never understood that your brilliance wasn't polished. It was honed in chaos. You're too broken. That was their favorite one. The one they whispered when you tried to reach for something better. The one they threw at you when you started to rise. As if your pain disqualified you from greatness. As if the very things that should have destroyed you somehow made you ineligible for hope. But what they failed to understand, what they still don't, is that your brokenness wasn't weakness. It was the proof of your fight. The shattered glass they called damage was actually a mirror reflecting every war you survived. They didn't just doubt you, they defined you, or tried to, with their mockery, with their silence, with their backhanded compliments and pitying eyes. They said, "It's just not in the cards for you." They said, "Some people just don't have it." They said, "Be realistic," over and over, like a lullaby designed to put your fire to sleep. But you didn't sleep. You listened. Oh yes, you listened, not to believe them, not to agree, but to remember. You burned every word into your bones, not because you needed their validation, but because you needed a reminder of how little they saw, a reminder of the gap between who you were and who you were becoming. They thought you were too quiet to fight back, too kind to bite, too weak to rise. But what they didn't realize is that you weren't broken, you were becoming. You never needed their approval, you just needed their underestimation. You needed that silence, that disbelief, that cruel laughter. Because now it's all fuel. Now, every time they doubted you, every time they rolled their eyes, every time they called you a joke, you hear it, you feel it. And it doesn't break you, it builds you. Because now, it's personal. This isn't about proving them wrong just for the sake of pride. This is about reclaiming your name, reclaiming every part of yourself they tried to erase, every dream they mocked, every goal they laughed at, every version of yourself you buried just to make them comfortable. And slowly, you started rising, not in grand cinematic moments, not with spotlights or slow-motion triumphs. Number you rose in shadows, in silence, in the grind. You rose when no one clapped. You rose when your hands were blistered and your mind was fraying, and your heart felt like it was beating out of sheer defiance. You rose because they forgot something important. You were listening, and not just listening. You were learning, watching, studying. Every smirk, every dismissal, it sharpened you. It taught you how to move in silence, how to weaponize your pain, how to turn every scar into steel. You became dangerous, not in spite of their doubts, but because of them. They thought they were better than you. They sat in rooms and whispered it like a fact. They joked about it, shared stories, crafted narratives. But now those same voices tremble, not openly, not yet, but deep down, they feel it. The shift, the hum in the air, the echo of something they didn't expect coming closer. They don't laugh like they used to, not as loud, not as long, because somewhere in the back of their mind, they know they woke something up in you. And now, you're not coming to make noise, you're coming to take space. So keep rising, keep grinding, keep forging yourself in fire and silence, because the higher you go, the quieter they become, until all that's left is the sound of your footsteps echoing through the halls they once kept locked. You were listening, now it's your turn to speak. There was a moment, that moment, when the weight finally crushed your chest, when the walls closed in so tight you could barely breathe. You remember it. Don't lie to yourself. You remember it like it happened an hour ago, because it still lives inside you, doesn't it? That breaking point, the moment where everything you were holding on to slipped through your fingers. You had nothing left but heartbeat and habit. Hope had already left the room. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was suffocating, and for the first time, you looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the person staring back. The floor didn't just crack, it disappeared. The world didn't just shift, it collapsed, and you were left standing in the ruins of every dream you'd ever had, every fight you'd ever given, every piece of yourself you'd stitched back together just to stay alive. And still, it wasn't enough. No matter how hard you fought, no matter how many times you pulled yourself out of the grave they dug for you, life found another way to break you. This wasn't cinematic. There were no cameras, no music, just the dull, constant ache of failure, of loneliness, of being so damn tired. Tired of proving, tired of hoping, tired of waking up and putting on the mask just to make it through another day where everything feels like a war and nothing feels like it's getting better. And that voice, the one you'd kept buried, finally started getting louder. Maybe they were right, that whisper, that venom. Maybe you are nothing. Maybe this is all you'll ever be. Maybe you are too broken, too far gone, too late. You almost believed it. You almost gave in. You almost laid down and let it win. You almost became what they said you would be. A ghost, a failure, a cautionary tale. You came that close to disappearing, not just from the world, but from yourself. You almost let it all go. But then, something sparked. A flicker, a crackle, a noise deep inside your chest that said, no, not like this. It wasn't a roar. It wasn't a lightning strike. It was quieter than that. It was stubborn, ancient, a whisper made of everything they tried to bury in you but couldn't. Kill. Not like this. That was your soul, clawing its way through the dirt. That was the fire they couldn't put out. That was every version of you they mocked and left for dead, rising in the dark. No help, no applause, just refusal. You refused to be erased. You refused to be another name on their list of the forgotten. That was the moment everything changed. Not because the pain vanished, not because the world suddenly gave you a chance, but because you chose not to die quietly. Because even on the edge, especially on the edge, you remembered who the hell you are. You remembered the kid who survived the chaos. You remembered the warrior who kept walking through heartbreak and betrayal and loneliness and loss. You remembered every scream you swallowed, every tear you hid, every time you told yourself, just one more day, and you said, "No, I don't end here. Not in this darkness, not on this floor, not like this." They wanted your story to end in silence. They wanted you to break and disappear, proof that they were right to doubt you. But you didn't give them that. Instead, you breathed, you stood. Even if your legs were shaking and your soul was cracked, you stood, because something inside you finally understood. If you were going to fall, it would be forward. If you were going to break, it would be into something stronger. And if you were going to die, it would be on your feet, screaming your truth into the fire. That's the moment they lost, right there, when you didn't quit. Because the truth is, you were never meant to be small. You were just kept in a cage so long you forgot your wings were still there. But now you remember, and nothing is more terrifying to them than someone who has nothing left to lose, except time, and your time. It's coming. The rise didn't start with light. It started with blood, with grit in your teeth and fire in your lungs, with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, and a heart that refused to die, even after everything. It started in the silence after the breakdown, in the stillness that came after you screamed yourself empty and still woke up breathing. That breath, it was war. That breath said, "I'm still here." That breath said, "You failed to kill me." And that breath was the beginning of everything. You weren't reborn in peace, you were resurrected in rage. Not the loud kind, not the kind that lashes out at the world. This was internal, controlled. The kind of rage that sharpens into purpose. The kind that gets up at 4 a.m. The kind that trains when no one's watching. That eats pain like protein. That bleeds and sweats and breaks and smiles through it. Because every moment of suffering is another brick in the empire you're building from your ashes. This wasn't a glow-up. This wasn't pretty. This was war. This was sacrifice. This was your resurrection. And you did it alone. There was no crowd cheering you on, no soft hands wiping your tears. There was just the grind, just the work, just the discipline that came from knowing there was no plan B, because this had to work. Because you weren't going back to who you were. You couldn't. You burned the past. You buried the old you. And in the funeral fire, something new began to crawl out of the grave. You started building a brick by agonizing brick. Every workout, every late night, every early morning, every representative, every page, every cut, every scream you swallowed and turned into fuel. You turned your pain into your program. You took every insult they threw at you and turned it into momentum. You made rage your routine, discipline your doctrine, obsession your religion. This wasn't motivation. Motivation is a spark. This was an inferno. You didn't do this because you wanted to look good or impress the ones who doubted you. You did it because you remembered why they laughed. You remembered what they said. You remembered how they made you feel when you were powerless. And so you trained for war. You bled into the dirt. You clawed at the walls. You ran until your lungs screamed and your legs betrayed you. You wrote until your fingers locked. You studied until your eyes blurred. You fought until the fight became instinct. You became the monster they tried to make you afraid of. Because you didn't rise for applause. You rose for revenge, not against them, but against every version of yourself that ever believed them. You rose to redeem every wasted year, every silenced word, every buried dream. This wasn't a makeover. This was a resurrection, a rebirth through agony. You didn't glow, you burned. And the pain, you made it a weapon. You stopped running from it and started using it. You invited it in. Let it teach you. Let it break you down so you could rebuild stronger. Pain became your mirror. It showed you who you were, who you weren't, and who you could become. And day by brutal day, you began becoming that person. Not overnight, not in clean, Instagrammable ways. You fell, you failed, you broke down again, but you got back up. And every time you rose, the old you died a little more. The weak you, the passive you. The silenced you. The version of yourself they tried to convince you was all you could ever be. You killed that person with your own hand, and in their place, you forged something else. A fighter, a hunter, a disciplined, focused, unforgiving soul who understands that greatness doesn't come to those who want it. It comes to those who are willing to suffer for it. You became your own savior. No shortcuts, no handouts, just pain and persistence. You carved a path where there was none. You built a body that could endure, a mind that couldn't be broken, a spirit that didn't ask for permission anymore. This is what the rise looks like. Dirty, violent, lonely, but pure. Because you earned every inch of it, every scar, every callus, every drop of sweat that soaked your grind. You didn't fake this. You didn't cheat this. You lived it, and now there's no turning back. You didn't come this far to blend in. You didn't endure the shadows just to live quietly in the light. You're not here to be liked. You're here to win. You're here to dominate. You're here to make them remember your name and regret ever laughing at it. Because this rise, this was never about the world. This was about you, your rage, your revenge, your redemption. And now the world will feel all of it. There's a part of the journey no one talks about. Not in the highlight reels, not in the success stories, not in the glamorous montages they feed you to keep you inspired but uninformed. They skip it, like it's too boring to mention, too ugly, too uncomfortable, but you know it well. It's the era of isolation, when the noise dies down and the crowd thins out, when your phone stops lighting up, when the check-ins go silent, when the people who used to laugh with you disappear the moment you stop being entertainment, when even your own shadow seems to walk a little behind you. You know this era because you lived it. You didn't choose solitude, it chose you. The moment you chose growth, sacrifice, obsession, they left. Not because you hurt them, not because you changed into something cruel, but because you became serious. And seriousness threatens the ones who only ever played at life. So you walked alone, you trained alone, you ate alone, you worked in silence. There were no claps, no congratulations, no one telling you, you got this. There was just you and the grind. You and the demon. You and that voice in your head that still whispered doubts while your body screamed from exhaustion. You and the brutal repetition of doing the hard thing again and again, while everyone else was asleep, distracted, or chasing dopamine. You were alone, and it hurt. Let's not pretend it didn't. Some nights it felt like a punishment, like life was mocking you for trying, like the silence was proof you were still no one. But here's the truth. That silence, that was the proof. It was the proof that you were finally stepping into a space most people never touch. You were outgrowing the rooms they wanted you trapped in. You were rising past the comfort zones they worshipped like altars. You weren't being abandoned. You were being separated. Because greatness is not a community event. It's not a group project. It's a lonely war. A slow, grinding crucible where the weak versions of you are burned away until all that's left is the truth. And the truth is, you don't need to be liked. You need to be undeniable. There is no applause here. There is no thank you. There's only sweat and silence and shadows. And if you can survive that, if you can sit with that kind of loneliness without letting it break you, then there's nothing in this world you can't become. Because you stopped needing validation. You stopped craving comfort. You stopped chasing noise. You started building in the dark, quiet, relentless, focused. While they scrolled, you studied. While they slept, you sculpted. While they talked, you moved. You didn't need them to see you. You needed time. You needed space. You needed the solitude to become something dangerous. And the loneliness? That became your forge, that ache in your chest when you ate alone. That was the echo of discipline, those walks with no one beside you. That was your body, learning how to carry its own weight, those nights when no one called, no one asked, no one noticed. That was your soul, learning how to speak its own name, in a language the world can't mispronounce. You were not lonely. You were becoming. There's power in isolation, sacred power, the kind of power that can't be taught, only earned. It's in the hunger that grows when no one's watching. It's in the resilience that's forged when you have nothing but your purpose and your pain. So if you're still walking through that era, don't run from it. Let it teach you. Let it strip away every piece of you that was built on approval. Let it kill the need to be seen before you've earned the right to be undeniable. Because this path you're walking, it's brutal, but it's blessed. Because when you come out the other side, when they finally look your way again, you won't need them anymore. And that's when you'll know you made it. Not when they clap, not when they ask you how you did it, not when they beg to be close again. You'll know you made it when their presence becomes irrelevant, because you've already become everything they thought you never could. Alone, unapplauded, unstoppable. There's a shift that happens, not overnight, not with fanfare, but deep and permanent. It's not something you celebrate. It's something you feel quietly, ruthlessly, like the turning of a blade inside your chest. You start noticing it in the silence, in your thoughts, in the way your reactions change, in the way your emotions don't leak out like they used to. You've stopped flinching. You've stopped explaining. You've stopped needing. You've awakened. And it's not what they told you it would feel like. It's not peace. It's not joy. It's not even pride. It's clarity. Cold, sharp, precise. You're no longer just trying to survive. You've become something else entirely. A weapon, not of violence, but of will, of discipline, of strategy, of control. They didn't see this version of you coming. They thought you'd stay soft, thought your heart would always break the same way, that your forgiveness was eternal, that your silence was submission, that your endurance was weakness. But they didn't know what the pain was doing, how it was carving out your illusions, cutting off your dependencies, sharpening your instincts like knives. You're not softer anymore. You're colder, clearer, wiser, not bitter, but precise, not angry, but aware. You don't react like you used to. You don't chase what you used to chase. You've stepped outside the game they played, and now you see the whole board. You've stopped moving like a pawn and started thinking like a king. And the old version of you, they're still trapped in that mirror, banging to get out, begging for comfort, asking for people to like them, to accept them, to stay. But you don't listen anymore. You don't recognize the mirror now, and that's how you know you've grown. You don't speak the same language as your old self. You don't breathe the same air. You don't need the same thing.